UnDoctor reset, the end of diagnosis, the return to humanity. The medicine was never in the bottle. It's always been between us. Have you ever wondered why, in a world overflowing with doctors, therapists, medications, and protocols, so many of us are still suffering? And have you ever questioned whether what we call mental illness is really actually illness, or whether sometimes it might just be an invitation to come alive again? Have you ever felt that maybe your diagnosis or your loved one's diagnosis doesn't quite capture your truth? That it describes the behavior but misses the humanity? And have you ever suspected that maybe the real medicine has never been in a bottle, but is in conversations that are now waiting to happen? That's what this whole thing is about. Let's go back to September 2010. There I was, driving east on I-94 between Indiana and Detroit, a road that I've driven hundreds of times on autopilot because my mind is drifting the way it does when you think you know where you're going. I see some headlights flood my rearview mirror. Way too close, way too fast. I try to veer, boom, boom again. And before too long, my car is exploding into motion, metal folding on itself as I go into the berm, as I go down into the forest. Glass becomes stars, trees rushing up where the road used to be. I'm rolling. I have no brakes. I have no steering. I have no control. I only have gravity and God. And then I hear the voice. Not inside me, not even outside of me, but everywhere. Fred, 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 what are we going to do with you? Gentle, almost amused. And then I hear, you know what? I'm going to let you live. But here's the deal. I'm going to give you everything you want. Good luck with that. And that has come true. The car landed upright. I climb out. I'm shaking, but I'm alive and I'm intact. And the man who hit me, well, he's staggering forward. He's drunk. He's horrified. He's apologizing. I really want to scream at him, but instead, something else emerges, and I forgive him. And right there, under flashing lights and twisted metal, I learned something that will take me decades to fully understand. Forgiveness is actually the first stage of freedom. That wasn't an accident. That was a contract. My name is Dr. Fred, or Dr. Fred Moss, and some people still call me the UnDoctor, which is really just a polite way of saying I spend a lot of time undoing what other doctors have already done. Because what if the system, the very system designed to heal us, is actually keeping us sick? What if the power to heal, the real medicine, was never in a pill, but was in a protocol, and was never in a protocol or a diagnosis, but already was living inside of us? By the time we're done today, you're going to understand what I call reset, how we release, examine, surrender, embody, and transform. Not as theory, but as lived truth. Because I didn't invent reset, I survived it. When I look back honestly at this life I've had, every major turning point followed the same rhythm. Collapse, pause, reorientation, and then return. Eventually, I gave that rhythm a name. Reset. Release what's false, examine what's true, surrender to simplicity, embody your essence, T, transform yourself and those around you. Reset isn't a method, it's a heartbeat. And every story I'm about to tell lives inside of these 3 letters, of these 5 letters, one way or another. How did I get to be who I got to be? Well, let's go back to the beginning. I was born into chaos and disarray. I had these 2 older brothers, 10 and 14 years older than me, and they're still 10 and 14 years older than me. And they were turning our house into a full contact sport. My parents were definitely overwhelmed, they were stretched thin, and they were simply trying to keep things together. I arrived as the third act, the baby drafted to bring peace. And for a while, it really worked. My laugh, well, it softened tempers. My smile, it changed the weather in the room. I didn't know it consciously, but I could feel it. Connection was changing everything. That was my first lesson in healing. And before language, before training, connection changes the temperature of a room. That was my first experience with release, releasing the need to fix chaos and answering it with presence. I was 5 years old in 1963. I came home from a neighborhood basketball game to find my parents just weeping, crying, bawling in front of the TV. Walter Cronkite's voice was shaking. President John F. Kennedy has been shot. Even as a child, I really felt something sacred fracture. And then over the next several years, it kept fracturing. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Robert Kennedy. Hope felt hunted. 5 months after Dallas in 1964, 4 beautiful kids from Liverpool stepped on the Ed Sullivan Show. And they sang, "I Want to Hold Your Hand." I watched wide-eyed. I loved the joy that filled the room. The Beatles didn't just make music, they broadcast medicine. I became like them. I grew my hair as long as theirs. I wore paisley. I threw around peace signs. They taught me my first real thesis. Love and connection are not luxuries, they are medicine. All you really need is love. At 13 years old, I met Steffi at summer camp. That's right, beautiful Steffi. She was light in human form. Canoes, laughter, secrets under the stars that seemed to listen. And for the first time in my life, I felt fully met. I felt connected. 8 weeks of young love. 8 weeks after camp ended, however, a drunk driver struck her on a Pittsburgh highway. The next morning, the air left the room. Time stopped as I learned. At 13, I had become a widower in spirit. Grief, it cracked me open. This was my first deep examine. I learned that grief is love with nowhere to go, and that love, being stubborn, finds places anyways. For years, I looked at the moon, and I felt Steffi there. I continue to, as she nudges me towards joy. Decades later, another drunk driver would hit me on I-94, and forgiveness would complete what grief began that day. Let's go to the senior year of high school, 1975. My best friend and I, well, we drove 40 miles to Ann Arbor to see a band that I'd never heard of, and we were audiophiles. We were there to see the next Bob Dylan